Hello and welcome to the Biological Anthropology lecture series. I'm Dr. Richard Jonathan O. Tadurin. Here we explore what it means to be human, biologically, evolutionarily, and behaviorally. Let's begin our journey into the science of humanity. Welcome to Module 10, The Origins of Modern Humans. In this module, we examine how Homo sapiens emerged, interacted with archaic humans, and spread across the globe. In earlier modules, we traced the rise of the genus Homo, from its small-bodied, stone tool-using beginnings to the global wanderer that Homo erectus became. Now we arrive at a turning point, the appearance of beings who look and behave recognizably like us. As we move through this module, think about how many pieces had to come together for modern humans to appear. Anatomical changes, like a rounded skull and a face tucked beneath it, didn't emerge overnight. They unfolded alongside shifts in behavior, technology, and even social relationships. You might wonder why this matters. Well, the story of modern human origins explains why populations today share deep connections despite being spread across every continent. It also shows that our species didn't grow in isolation. We overlapped and even interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans. Modern human origins weren't a single event, but a long, braided process. Genetic evidence, new fossils, and archaeological discoveries constantly refine the picture. In the next sections, we'll explore what makes our species anatomically modern, how scientists debate our origins, and how humans eventually reached Australia, the Pacific, and the Americas. By the end, you'll see how the emergence of Homo sapiens is both a biological story and a reminder of our shared global ancestry. In this section, we explore the anatomical and behavioral traits that define modern Homo sapiens. Let's revisit what researchers mean when they describe a fossil as anatomically modern. We're not talking about perfection or identicality with present-day humans. Rather, we're looking for a constellation of traits that, taken together, signal the emergence of Homo sapiens. When you look at a modern human skull, the first thing you'll notice is the shape. The vault rises high and curves smoothly, creating a rounded outline instead of the long, low cranial form we see in earlier hominins. The forehead becomes more vertical, and the massive brow ridges that characterize Neanderthals and other archaic humans are greatly reduced. Now, this part is important. The face tucks in under the brain case. It's flatter, lighter, and more delicate. And then there's the chin. You might take it for granted, but the chin is a uniquely modern human feature. No other hominin consistently has one. Think about this as a kind of landmark that tells us we're dealing with a different pattern of growth and development. As we move beyond the skull, let's look at the body. Early modern humans have a more gracile skeleton, with longer limbs relative to body size. These proportions aren't random. They reflect adaptations for efficiency in movement and temperature regulation, especially in the diverse environments early Homo sapiens encountered. The postcranial skeleton also shows a lighter build overall, which contrasts with the stockier frames of Neanderthals. You might wonder why these distinctions matter so much. They allow us to trace when and where modern humans appeared, and how they differed from the other hominins they met along the way. More importantly, these anatomical changes align with shifts in behavior, symbolic expression, complex tools, long-distance networks that together form the foundation of what we recognize as distinctly human. In other words, anatomy helps us see the emergence of a species capable not only of survival, but of creativity, innovation, and profound social depth. Let's revisit what we're looking for when we try to identify early members of Homo sapiens in the fossil record. We're not just searching for a single dramatic first specimen. Instead, we trace a series of fossils that, taken together, show the gradual emergence of the anatomical traits we discussed earlier: rounded skulls, reduced brow ridges, smaller faces, and more gracile bodies. These fossils help us understand not only when modern humans appeared, but how widespread and variable they were in their earliest forms. Let's look at Africa, which provides the strongest evidence for the origins of modern humans. The Omo Kibish remains from Ethiopia, dating to nearly 195,000 years ago, are among the earliest clear examples of Homo sapiens. Their cranial shape is unmistakably modern, even though some features still hint at deeper archaic roots. A similar pattern appears in the Herto fossils, also from Ethiopia and dating to around 160,000 years ago. These individuals show a blend of traits, a high, rounded vault consistent with modern humans, but also a somewhat robust face compared to what we see later. Think about this as a reminder that early modern humans were not clones of us. They were populations evolving along a trajectory that would later become more refined. Africa is not the only place where early modern-looking fossils appear. North African finds, such as those from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, push the timeline back even further to about 300,000 years ago. These individuals have modern facial structures but elongated brain cases, again highlighting that anatomical modernity did not emerge all at once. Instead, it developed in stages, and likely in multiple regions within Africa. As humans began moving out of Africa, their fossils start appearing in the Levant. The Skhul and Qafzeh remains, dating roughly between 120,000 and 90,000 years ago, show clear modern features, but they also lived alongside Neanderthals. You might wonder why this matters. It tells us that contact between different hominin groups happened early and repeatedly. These populations didn't exist in isolation. They were part of a dynamic landscape of migrations and interactions. Further into Europe, fossils such as those from Peștera to Oase in Romania reveal something even more intriguing. Although these individuals are anatomically modern, their genomes show unmistakable evidence of interbreeding with Neanderthals, sometimes within just a few generations. Think about what that means. The boundaries between groups were permeable, and their encounters left genetic footprints still detectable today. You also see early modern humans in places like Central Europe, for example at Mladeč, where the bones carry the full suite of cranial traits we associate with our species. But again, these populations weren't isolated pioneers. They were part of a broader wave of dispersal that carried modern humans across Eurasia. So when we look at the fossil evidence for early modern humans, we see a story that is not linear but braided. Different regions preserve different snapshots of the same evolving species. Some fossils look almost fully modern, while others carry a mix of traits that remind us of earlier ancestors. Together, they show that the emergence of Homo sapiens was not an instantaneous event, but a long, complex process shaped by movement, variation, and interaction. Let's revisit what we mean by behavioral modernity. It's tempting to imagine a sudden spark, a moment when humans suddenly became creative, symbolic, or technologically sophisticated. But when we look closely at the archaeological record, the story is far more gradual and much more interesting. Modern behaviors arise in fits and starts, appearing in one region, disappearing for a while, and then reappearing somewhere else. This uneven pattern tells us that early humans were experimenting with new ways of thinking and interacting long before these behaviors became widespread. Let's look at some examples. Engraved ochre, personal ornaments, and shaped bone tools appear at various African sites associated with early Homo sapiens. These items show that people weren't just surviving. They were communicating ideas, identity, and group belonging. You might wonder why this matters. Symbolic behavior is often considered one of the clearest markers of modern cognition because it reflects the ability to think abstractly and to use objects to convey meanings that everyone in the group understands. Archaic humans also show hints of sophisticated behavior. Neanderthals, for instance, used pigments, made specialized tools, and may have engaged in simple forms of symbolic expression. But what distinguishes early modern humans is the consistency and diversity of these behaviors. We start seeing long-distance transport of raw materials, for example, which suggests expanded social networks and planning depth. We also find evidence of ritualized burials, where bodies were placed intentionally, sometimes with objects that may have held symbolic or emotional significance. As technologies evolve, we see a shift from simple flake tools to more refined blade industries, composite tools, and eventually the use of adhesives to have stone points onto shafts. These innovations don't just reflect better craftsmanship, they point to increasingly complex sequences of thought, cooperation, and knowledge transmission. Think about this as the gradual layering of abilities. Each generation inherited not only biological traits, but cultural know-how, which allowed new behaviors to build on earlier ones. By the time modern humans began dispersing widely across Africa, Asia, and Europe, they carried with them a growing toolkit of symbolic practices, social strategies, and technological skills. So when we contrast archaic and modern behavior, the distinction isn't about who was smart and who wasn't. It's about how frequently, how consistently, and how flexibly certain behaviors appeared. Modern humans show a pattern of innovation that accelerates over time, eventually giving rise to the diverse cultural worlds we recognize today. First, let's revisit the main thread running through this entire section. Modern humans are defined not by a single anatomical trait or a single cultural breakthrough, but by the way these changes emerge together over time. When we looked at the fossil evidence, from Omo and Herto in East Africa to Jebel Irhoud in the north, we saw how early Homo sapiens carried a blend of modern and archaic features. Their rounded skulls and lighter faces didn't appear all at once, but they signaled a direction that later populations would follow more fully. Now, this part is important. These anatomical changes were unfolding at the same time that behavior was becoming more flexible, symbolic, and socially complex. Think about the engraved ochre, the personal ornaments, and the long-distance movement of materials. These weren't just clever tricks. They reflected an emerging way of thinking, one in which meaning, communication, and cooperation became central to survival. You might wonder why tying anatomy and behavior together matters. It matters because it shows us that being modern wasn't a switch that flipped. It was a gradual layering of abilities, biological, cognitive, and cultural, that reinforced one another. By the time early modern humans began spreading beyond Africa, they were carrying not just new bodies, but new possibilities for innovation and shared identity. As we move into the next section on models of human origins, keep in mind how this blend of anatomy and behavior sets Homo sapiens apart. It's the foundation for understanding how our species emerged, interacted with others, and eventually became global. Thank you for joining this lecture. I'm Dr. Richard Jonathan O. Taduran. I hope this session deepened your understanding of biological anthropology. Keep exploring what it means to be human. See you soon.